one of the things I think that I've really been able to take, even from all of these modalities, is just your body always makes the most intelligent choice. It might not be the choice that you want it to make, but it's thinking in survival context. I find it so amazing when you really start to tune in and look at it that like your body is making all these amazing choices all the time, even without our conscious awareness of it.
Elizabeth is the owner of Soleful Beginnings, a thriving wellness studio based in Portsmouth, Rhode Island. Elizabeth has a passion for teaching and is dedicated to empowering and supporting people on their healing journeys. She offers an abundance of menu options, including yoga, melt classes, Ayurvedic workshops, group intuitive insight circles, as well as her latest offering, a self-paced Reiki training certification course. Elizabeth practices an integrated method, weaving many different holistic modalities together that create customized sessions and classes that allow for expansion and exploration of the body, mind, and spirit. Elizabeth is a Certified Intuition Practitioner, Reflexologist, Reiki Master Teacher, and Ayurvedic Health Coach, amongst many other holistic certifications. Like many of my guests, Elizabeth and I met through an intuition development course, so of course we share a lot of the same passions around energy and other healing modalities. Enjoy my conversation with Elizabeth Corvese. Elizabeth, thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to chat. I know a little bit about what you do, but I can't wait to dive into a little bit more with you today. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited.
You're the owner of Soulful Beginnings, a wellness studio dedicated to empowering and supporting others on their healing journeys. I love it. I love it. I looked at your bio and I was perusing your website a little bit, and you offer all these really, I call them yummy menu options of health and wellness practices and modalities. And of course, I have some questions about all of them. I mean, I think I have some basic foundational understanding of most of them, but I'm really excited to talk with you today and dig into some of them more. I think most people in the healing arts, they tend to have gotten into that because of their own personal journeys, or, they've healed from something or they've overcame something, right? Where it's very different from people who go to college and get an education and teach because it's something they learned from a school environment. But I think that life really teaches us a lot. And I think that those of us in the healing arts, that's where we find our lane. So I'd love to hear how that has all transpired for you and how you kind of got into this work. And maybe that's a good place to start.
Absolutely. I just want to say I love that you call the different modalities yummy, because that's a word that comes to me a lot. And I'm just like, oh, so it is used. I love it. So for me, this was very much like not expected. I went to college for psychology, then I got my master's in Spanish and I was teaching Spanish, and then I was interpreting in hospital settings. And that's kind of when, for me, my body started talking to me. And I'd always been very healthy. I was an athlete, everything like that. And I just thought it was so weird that all of a sudden it was like digestive issues and pain. And I was like, what is going on in my body? And it was at a time where I was just experiencing a lot of stress because I was just going between hospitals, between clinics, and there was a lot going on. And I wasn't listening to my body at all. I was like, oh, I'm tired. I'll just have another Starbucks coffee. And I didn't realize at the time, but it was like I was headed down the road of just all these little quick fixes. And it finally came to the point where my body was like, nope, no more. Because a few weeks I started having weird abdominal pains, weird digestive issues. And what ended up happening is I ended up in the ER with an ovarian cyst. And it was a larger one. So unfortunately, anybody who has had one knows that it's kind of like a wait and go away or a surgery. And at the time I was 27. So at 27, they don't want to risk a surgery just to try to save the ovary. So then they were just kind of like, go home, sit on bed rest for 6 weeks, and then we'll see you again for a repeat ultrasound. And at that point in my life, I was like, oh my God, I have to stay in bed for I have to be on bed rest for 6 weeks. That to me was just completely like unimaginable. I'm like, well, what am I gonna do? And it gave me some time. Like at first it was very uncomfortable just to be in that kind of stillness because as having like an athletic background, I was always on the go and I didn't realize what stillness was. So just being in that stillness, it made me realize that I didn't remember the last time that I had stopped for anything. And I was coming on with my research brain, like, well, what else could there be that could help me? Because I don't want to be doing this for 6 weeks. This is not something that I want to do. And that's when I started going for manual lymph drainage. And she was like, you know what, you should go for acupuncture too, because I was just ready. I was like, you know what, I don't like the suggestions that they're giving me for this. And she was like, nope, try acupuncture. So I did MLD daily. I quit daily for about 2 weeks. I went to acupuncture once a week. And when I went for my follow up ultrasound to check on the cyst, it was gone.
Wow.
And I didn't feel it, like, I didn't feel it break, I didn't feel anything like that, and when I was in the hospital 6 weeks before, it was very much intact. So, for me, that was just so eye-opening, and I was like, "I have to know more about this. I wanna experience this." Even for my it was for my own healing at that point.
Sure. Wow. I got goosebumps when you said it was gone because you hear stories of that. Who comes to mind for me is Louise Hay. I'm like a huge follower of her work. And, she, in the same sense, really through stillness and all other healing modalities, cured herself of breast cancer. But when you said stillness, I can totally relate to you on that level of go, go, go. Actually, just very recently, I came to the awareness that I have always worked 2 jobs since I was 16. And I recently, at the tail end of last year, took probably about, well, it was a little longer than 6 weeks, but I took some pretty significant time off in my business. And I totally get what you mean. Coming into that stillness and going through it, it's tough. But when you come out of that stillness, you're like, oh my gosh, I want to do that again. Like it was so rejuvenating, right? And I think for so many people, they don't stop. It is always go. And like you mentioned, the Starbucks, like I'll fix it with a Starbucks, I'll just add caffeine. And it's just like, in a sense, really adding more poison. I mean, no offense, I drink coffee. That's not what I'm saying, but it's like not really fixing the situation, right? It's just band-aiding it.
Such a perspective change. Like,
Yeah.
just thinking, like, there's other ways. Like, I have a lot of respect as somebody who worked in the hospital system and clinics and everything like that, and in the interpreter focus. I have so much respect for all of that. I think that they work so well together. And
Mm.
I think, for me even to know, because at first I just knew I had pain, for them to tell me, "Oh, it's an ovarian cyst." Okay, now I have an idea of what's going on, and then using kind of these complementary therapies to kind of just bring it all together, it really felt complete care.
Mhm.
That's really how it felt.
Yeah. So you started with some acupuncture, the lymphatic draining therapy. What what kind of led you into your first modality? What did you start with? I know you offer reflexology, Reiki, Ayurvedic, of course, yoga, and the melt. Like you have, like I said, a yummy menu of options that people could learn from you. But what was kind of your first one that you started with?
So the first one was actually when I was on bed rest. My mom took me on a trip to Barnes and Noble, and I got to go as long as I made sure that I sat down most of the time. And the place where I sat down, and this is like one of those, I just believe it's a sign from the universe, is where I sat down. What caught my eye was a Reiki for Dummies book. And I had never heard about Reiki, nothing. And something was just like, you need to just read this book. So I brought it home and I read it. And I was just from that point on, I was hooked. I want to use this on myself because my journey really started to be like, how can I use these modalities to heal myself, especially with Reiki? At that point, it was like, okay, I'm on bed rest. What else am I going to do? And I ended up finding a training randomly. So I actually did my Reiki 1 training a week after I was off. bed rest. I did it that weekend and it was an amazing experience.
So, like I said, I have some basic understanding of Reiki and some of these other modalities, but maybe for the audience, how do you explain what Reiki is and how are you did it to yourself is what you're telling me. So it can be something you can do to yourself and maybe give us even some little tools that we could use.
So Reiki is, I always say Reiki is kind of an experience, but to put it into words, it's a stress release technique. It's Japanese in origin, and it's just a very simple, light, hands on or hands off technique. There is hands on Reiki as well as hands off. So it's kind of depending on what the comfort level is. If you're working with other people or even with working with myself, because I always say that's the best way to start because now I actually teach Reiki and that's always one of the things that I recommend is we all love to work on other people, like we all love to give, but you learn so much by working with yourself as well and just helping that energy. Cause I think of just in this work as we're all conduits. So we always want to work on our channel and clearing our channel. And sometimes the easiest way is putting one hand on the heart, one hand on the belly. And I also tell people being attuned to Reiki is good. That's just kind of bringing more consciousness to it. And that's kind of what you would learn in a training. But even just putting your one hand on your heart, one hand on your belly, and just kind of giving those good intentions, that's a wonderful thing to do for yourself. Even one of the things I do in Reiki training is really fun is I have people rub their hands together and then we kind of make an energy ball and we just feel that's your life force energy. That's there. And it's just a really fun way of bringing in that energetic part of ourselves that, for me, I feel like I had no knowledge of it before. And it's just such an important aspect. And you don't have to be, a professional in order to give yourself some really nice energy work.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Reiki ball. I've actually taught that to my kids. My daughter, not as much, but a few years ago, she was highly anxious. But I have to say, like, I've really given her some tools that she can now manage her anxiety on her own when it comes up, but it does not come up very often. I mean, we did a few things, of course, I feng shuied her room. So we put her in a better sleeping position. The Reiki ball, just breathing techniques, just some really general routine maintenance. I mean, when I was a kid, like none of this was talked about. You know what I mean? So I love that all of these modalities and energy work is being so brought to light here in our Western culture. It feels good to have it available to us.
Absolutely. And I think your daughter's so lucky because
Yeah.
when we start learning things when we're young, that's when we could really start like finding our own way with it. And that's one of the things that I always teach is like, there's Reiki hand positions, there's all of these things, but you got to find your way with it. Like maybe the heart and the belly is not where you want to put your hands. Maybe you want to put one on your head and one on your belly or on your shoulders. And it's just kind of feeling the freedom of I can do that because that's what feels best in my body.
Right. So I do want to talk about reflexology too. Again, basic understanding. I know that there's some acupressure points on primarily hands and feet, but is it anywhere else in the body?
So yes, it is pressure points that kind of connect to the different organs, muscles, chakras. So it can be on that physical level and the energetic as well. It is primarily on the hands and feet, but it is also on the face and the ears. So I really enjoy kind of putting all of that together because they all have kind of like unique connections. The feet are more, and they are all connected to all levels, but some, for example, the feet are more connected to the physical level. The hands are more connected to the emotional level, and the ears are more connected to the mental level. So that's always a good thing to keep in mind too, because like that's why people are like, "Oh, the ears are so relaxing." Well, of course, because we're all in our heads all the time. So our ear, and when we have somebody do some points on our ears, it's just gonna feel like magic.
Yeah. So I know you're not an acupuncturist, but I know you have a lot. Obviously, you've had acupuncture before. So what would be like the difference? When would you advise someone to maybe get reflexology versus an acupuncture treatment?
So for acupuncture, it's a little bit more guided towards the medical side. in general, like they work more with the meridians. So with reflexology, I practice more of the Western reflexology. So those points are more like for the organs, for the muscles, different parts of the body. I would say it's hard to really because it kind of depends on what is presenting, but I would say they're both wonderful.
For sure. My first acupuncture treatment, I cried. Not because I was in pain. It was just a complete mental, emotional, just release. Like there was nothing. It was so meditative. Like I was just in that like space. I was like almost asleep. And then I just started crying for no reason. I wasn't in a thought about anything in particular in my life. It just immediately like opened a valve. It was crazy. Never experienced something like that before. It was wild.
Exactly. Those releases, I feel like you could have releases in all modalities, but I find too, and I'm glad that you said that. I found that my releases with acupuncture were much more than they were with Reiki reflexology. And I've had emotional releases with all of them, but I felt like the acupuncture one, it always felt like it was very just kind of out of nowhere. It was just kind of like up and out now.
Yeah, yeah, I've had that experience with acupuncture and breath work. The last time I did a breath work session, it was on the floor, rolled onto my side and just ugly crying. Like it was wild. It was so crazy. It's like almost embarrassing even sharing it. I mean, it was like floods. Um, but it's great. I mean, I love it because you don't even know it's lingering in there because it's showing up in your life in different ways, right? Whether it's just emotional blocks, like you're angry and irritable, or, you know, mentally blocked, not, you don't have clarity on something, right? So I mean, that is definitely my outlet is crying. I mean, I can't even watch an iPhone commercial without welling up with tears. And my kids laugh at me. They think it's hilarious. I have only recently started to accept that about myself. Before I'd always be embarrassed, but yeah, I'm a crier and you know what? I don't care. I'm stating that now.
And I love that because like I feel like for a long time, like for me personally, I didn't cry. And when I was doing my reflexology training, we were so in the beginning of the program. So we were like not doing anything right. And I had somebody working on my seat. And I just remember there was like kind of like this, I want to say it was like a little skylight thing, and these birds went by. And I just like burst out crying, hysterical, could not stop crying. And this is at a point in training where we're just kind of pressing on the foot all over the place and trying to do something. And it just shows, I think, too, that it's so much about the intention. And that's what I took away with it. Like her intention was that she was like, I'm doing this the best I can for Elizabeth. And even though it wasn't professional reflexology, I had one of the biggest releases that I've ever had.
Amazing. Yeah. And you said you never were like a crier. I always was, but even as a kid, I always remember I would feel the need to cry, but I would always suppress it. And so now I think it's just like everything over the years is just like ready to come out. And that's only recent awareness. You know what I mean? These are not things that I've always known, but obviously very recent. Okay, so I have a personal question then, because you mentioned the organs, and I'm familiar with like the five elements. Obviously, it's the Living Elemental podcast. So I'm a strong wood element. So the organs for me that get out of balance are liver and gallbladder, because I can get like easily frustrated, irritable, even sometimes angry when things aren't going the way I want them to. So what could be some good reflexology points that maybe I could even do for myself for that?
So I always do the hand. That's always kind of like my go-to for self-reflexology because in general, like, yes, it's wonderful to work on the feet, but it's hard to work on your own feet. That's why I would say get somebody to do it for you. Yeah, you can train husbands, boyfriends, partners. They can do really great reflexology on you with very little training. So for the liver, what you want to do is it's kind of like halfway, like if you do like a little line halfway down your palm on your right hand, because the liver and the gallbladder are on your right side. So you want to always make sure that's honestly one of the only points in reflexology that's only on one side. It's the same thing with the spleen being on the left and the stomach on the left. So with this, you kind of want to draw that line, and that's your diaphragm line. So if you have to release imbalance in that area, you can just kind of go across the diaphragm. And that's one way to kind of start. And with reflexology, it's almost like an inchworm motion. So it's kind of cool. Like you use your thumb when you're on the feet, but like feel free to use any finger that's comfortable. And you can just go like just straight across. And then when you kind of get to the end near the pinky, the liver is kind of big. So on the hand, it kind of takes up this space down here. So it's like right under on that pinky side. So you can do that same thing. It's that same just kind of going across. It is really nice. It is really relaxing. And you might feel, depending on how hard you press, you don't have to press hard at all, but sometimes you'll feel little crunchies under the skin. And that's a sign that there is just some imbalance going on. And I always tell people imbalance is on so many different levels. So it doesn't mean like, oh my God, I have crunchies in my liver. What's wrong with my liver? If it's no, like it could be on another level. It could be on emotional, mental, energetic level. One of the things I say a lot is when I say something that I always start with, if there was something physically wrong with it, I probably wouldn't be the first person telling you that. And then the gallbladder is actually in that liver area too. So it's just kind of like just a little bit down from that middle. And I always say, again, intention is big. So if you're not hitting the exact point, be thinking about the point that you want to hit. And that usually has amazing results in itself. And with the gallbladder, what I find a lot of it when it's really active is when there's a little bit, the word that they use in all the books is bitterness. And I don't like that word. What I like is that there's certain things that you're just like, why did that need to happen? I always feel like that's kind of the gallbladder will become active when it's that kind of thing. Like, I don't really want that to happen like that. Like, why did that have to go that way? Instead of using the word, I don't know. Bitterness doesn't really resonate with me, but
I love that. And oh my gosh. Okay. So here's so much going on in my head. So completely being honest, I've never looked at like acupressure points or where my liver is on my hands. Like I've never done any of that. But as you're saying how to rub it across the middle of your palm, I do that naturally when I'm like stressed, I thought I got it from my grandmother because she would always sit there and go like this, like rubbing her hand, like, wow. And she would always say that, wow, like she was real, like timid and nervous. And she was this petite little thing, just so sweet and so kind. And she would always rub her hands together. So I always thought, I just picked that up from my grandmother. But as you're telling me this, it's like my body naturally knew what to do. But now I love that I connected that dot because now I can have more intention about it. Right. But I love that it was already happening. That's amazing. That is amazing. And then second thing, well, I'm sorry. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry. I'm like excited about this.
no, you go ahead. You go.
The gallbladder, when you said about bitterness, and at first I was like, okay, I don't feel bitter. But then when you said what I like to say, why did it go that way? I do say, I'll say things like, oh, of course that happened. So I guess that's what you're saying, along the lines of bitterness. So that is so interesting.
Yes, our bodies are so intelligent. It's going to lead us to the spot. Like I even say, like people who cross their legs and they're like, oh, I shouldn't cross my legs and stuff like that. It's actually helping a tight muscle. Like one of those muscles is tight. And by crossing your legs, your body is doing the most intelligent choice. And that's one of the things I think that I've really been able to take, even from all of these modalities, is just your body always makes the most intelligent choice. It might not be the choice that you want it to make, but it's thinking in like a survival context, like, oh, that muscle's tight and it's more on the right side or the left side. So you're always going to cross that leg over. And then it's like, oh my God, I can't cross my legs. But your body is actually doing that in a way of helping to loosen up like those muscles in the hip and the glute. And it's just, I find it so amazing when you really start to tune in and look at it that like your body is making all these amazing choices all the time, even without our conscious awareness of it.
Yeah, amazing. You also offer yoga in your studio. You have the melt method. What exactly is that?
So the melt method is I actually had a client stumble upon the melt method and sent the information to me and said, you got to check this out. And I did because melt has some similarities with reflexology, just with some of the ball work. So what melt is it's basically a technique and it's something that you do for yourself. and it's using soft tools, so soft balls, soft rollers, and it's working to reconnect, rebalance, rehydrate, and release the fascia. So there's a lot of techniques out there that are just all about fascia release, and it's like dig it in there as like as hard as you can. And melt is very different in the sense that it's all about rehydrating and opening the area. But there's also in the reconnect part, it's bringing you back into your body. So at the beginning of a melt class or a melt session, you really evaluate your body. Just like, all right, how do the shoulders feel? And there's a few different things that you say. How about the diaphragm and the hips? So you get to see where your imbalances are. And then at the end, after doing really gentle techniques with the balls on the hands and the feet, and the points are very similar to reflexology. And I was able to actually bring it into reflexology too, because I was like, oh, that's the myofascial lines. Like I had no idea that the fascia was connecting in those places. So that was even more connections for me. And then to be able to be like, oh, yes, so now you can do some of these techniques at home on your own with soft balls and then with the soft rollers. So it's the foam roller, but it's not like hard foam roller. It's very soft. So you can actually like bend it, which is very cool. So it's very good for all levels. It's not going to cause any bruising or anything like that. It's just very gentle and it's meant to kind of open up the body. So by the end, you're able to see a difference. One of the best times in class we've had many, it's a lot of laughs with melt, is when there's tension in the hips, what you'll feel is kind of like your tailbone sticking into the floor when you're laying down. And at the end of class, one of the things is, all right, do you feel like the tailbone is still sticking into the floor? And I had somebody say, I can feel my butt cheeks. And they were so excited because that means that your pelvis is relaxing. So it's even feeling your body in just different ways and being like, all right, well, if I do like these simple little exercises, that really works well for your body because with melt, it can be, again, very different per body. So it's an exploration for everybody to be like, when I release my lower body, my shoulders release. Didn't even do anything with the shoulders. So it's always good information too for going forward on how to work with your own unique body.
Okay. So I'm having all these aha moments as you're talking to me. So you mentioned the tailbone digging into the ground. And I have really tight hips. And I'll tell you, not even just when I'm laying on my yoga mat or even just sitting, I feel very like tender right in that tailbone area. I do think it's all stuck in the fascia because it doesn't feel deep, but it's like really tender, even to the touch, like down the whole leg, really. Shins, backs of my legs. And I know, and I can't quite figure out where it's at. Do you offer your melt classes online?
Yes, I do. So
Oh,
I do
okay.
them live stream. So they're in person and they're live stream. So I kind of like that too, because what some people will be, they're traveling or something like that and melt balls and everything. It's like a bag. It's very small. You could take it traveling and then there's like a little travel roller. So it's very easy to kind of take on the go. And it's something that I bring with me all the time. Like if I go somewhere, even for a weekend, I'm bringing my melt balls and I'm bringing my roller just because I've learned so much about my body. And once you start doing it, you feel it when you don't do it, for sure.
Interesting. I love that. I'm definitely going to give this a try because you're right. The foam rollers they're tough. They hurt. And I have like one of those Orby balls too. And again, that's also kind of hard and it's a little big. But I like that they're a little bit more squishy so that it's not so painful because it's painful. This fascia. And I feel like it's like stuck. So with this melt method, it'll kind of gradually just let it, what did you say? Hydrate it. And there was another word you used.
Reconnect, rebalance, and release.
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds amazing. I'm going to give that a try.
And it's one of those things that, I talk about fascia, I say it's like a bag. And sometimes just like say we get cut or say we have an injury, that fascia, it tightens up. So that's why sometimes with like stretching, the people will be like, I stretch and I stretch, but you're stretching the muscles. And if the bag is too tight, the muscles aren't going to release.
No. Yeah, that's what I do. I just stretch or I'll do some yoga poses that feel good, but it's like they only feel good in the moment. They're not really recalibrating what needs to be recalibrated. So I think this might be my next modality that I need to try. So I'm excited we touched on this. Awesome. And I've noticed you've also been doing a little bit more Ayurvedic stuff with your practice. How did that kind of start? Tell us about what you're doing with that.
So with Ayurveda, I started it in 2020, actually, right before the pandemic. And I feel like it's what got me through the pandemic because I was just starting in like the level one course. And all of a sudden, there's nothing else to do. And I was very grateful for the fact that it was online. So it was something that kind of carried me through that time. So it really gave me so much space to be able just to think about what is possible. And what I love about Ayurveda, it means the wisdom of life. And it's very simple. It doesn't have all kinds of rules. It's more about bringing back into balance. So with Ayurveda, what you learn is you learn your constitution. And a lot of people go a little crazy with that. They're like, oh, I'm just one of the three. Like I'll hear that all the time. I hear like, I'm a pitta, I'm a vata, I'm a kapha. And I just want to say, no, you're all of those things because all of those things are so important. If you didn't have one of those aspects, like you wouldn't be a functioning human because we need all those different parts. Like a lot of us just society wise kind of have like that predominant pitta, which is kind of like the hardworking, intelligent, sharp cutting. And then there's the vata, which is quick moving, like very creative, always like jumping from one thing to the next, very spiritual. A lot of healers have a lot of vata. And we have a lot of that because in our society, we have a lot of that. Like we have a lot of vata energy. We're like, go, 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 chaos, everything like that. Because all of these energy doshas have the positives, the things that are kind of like, we need to balance that a little bit. So a lot of us kind of go in that direction. And then we forget about the kapha, which is these are the things that are saving our lives. Like that day that you decide you're going to take a nap in the afternoon and then you beat yourself up over it because you weren't productive. That's the kapha coming in and giving you a hug and saying, I'm going to save you right now. So one of my teachers, Katie Silcox, she would say those things that you do that you don't particularly like and you feel lazy or whatever, those practices are saving your life. And even as you mentioned on the nutrition side of it, I just kind of, I ate what my parents and my grandparents gave me and I never thought anything of it. And even thinking, because sometimes it's like you can go really far on one side or really far on the other side, and there really isn't a middle. And one of the things that Katie would say is she was like, sometimes if you're in a bad mood and you're like trying to cook this meal and you're just like, you don't want to do it. She's like, just order the pizza. It's going to have better energy than anything you could possibly do. So I kind of had a modern background with the Ayurveda. It was very much a modern take, but also we learned the traditional stuff. So my biggest takeaway was to really just get more in tune with that body and what it's asking for. And when we need these things that we consider bad, like ordering takeout or taking a nap or taking a day off or whatever it may be, like that's our body being like, I got you. It's more something that we need to lead into instead of beat ourselves up over.
Yeah, I love that you say that because that's really only been very recent that I've been allowing myself some of that grace, right? Because, yeah, we do. We beat ourselves up for not working as hard or if we procrastinate. I mean, procrastination brings up a whole nother subject for me. Like I see why I do that or why I strive for perfectionism. But yeah, just this weekend, like the whole weekend, there's so much going on in our life at this moment that I had no mental space to grocery shop, think of a list, actually get my butt to the store. And, part of me was feeling guilty for eating out all weekend. But you know what? It was actually very relaxing. Like we had great food. We connected as a family. There was no arguing. Like kids didn't like my chicken, whatever, So, you know what? It was great. It was great.
Exactly. And it's all about that energy as well. And I think that's a big part of the Ayurveda is also like respecting what's there. Like if your gas tank has nothing in it, maybe today is not the day to cook this like wonderful, healthy thing, which would be great. But there's just the energy going into it isn't going to be the same. And also just like being able to enjoy. That's why I think sometimes I know because Ayurveda is kind of interesting, but it's very much a continuum. And I just tell people, I'm like, if it's something that makes you happy, wouldn't worry about it. If it's something that's not bothering you, I wouldn't worry about
Yeah, we all need to take that advice more often than not, right?
it. Yes, I need to take my own advice as well.
Yes, I know. That's the challenge, is taking your own advice. I say that all the time. I'm so good at giving other people good insight or, good advice and never take it. Well, I'm getting better. I shouldn't say never. Never used to, but I am getting better at it. So I'm going to just pause for 1 second because my daughter will not quit staring at me. Kendall, come here. She wants the dog. My dog's in here. Close the door, okay? Okay, I will get you mac and cheese when I'm finished. Go. All right. Sorry about that. He was like seriously there for like 10 minutes and I kept like giving her the finger like and she just wanted the dog. Okay. So, all right. Um sorry, I don't mean to be distracting.
No worries. You have to flow with it. That's Ayurveda.
Right.
Like it's not gonna be
Yeah.
perfect. You have to do the best with what you got, you know?
Right. Right. And I hear a lot with what you're saying with the doshas. It reminds me a lot of the elements too, is we really need that integration of all of them. I find that people are, dominant in one or maybe two, and that's fine, but really understanding that all of them is really what creates that more harmonious cycle or balance that we need in our life. So I'm going to check that out because I don't know too much about Ayurveda either, but seems very similar in practices.
Absolutely. It's, I feel like with like traditional Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, there's so many overlaps. There might be different words for it, but there is so much overlapping information with it.
Yeah. So I'm going to wrap up with a question that I try to ask all my guests. And it's really back to balance, which we sort of alluded to it a little bit. But really the whole point of this podcast was to talk about ways in which we can find more balance for ourselves. And I'm careful with the word balance because I don't want anyone to think that this strive for balance is this, on the same level as striving for some perfect state of being. And that's not what it is. But I think when you have some awareness about when you're out of balance, what are the tools to get you back into ease and flowful state? So I'm curious for you yourself, like what do you do to kind of bring things back into some state of balance?
So for me, I love that balance is different every single day and it looks very different for me. And it took me a long time to get there because I was one of those people I like to go all in. So I kind of made like these very perfectionistic routines and it didn't quite work out. And I realized I needed a little bit more flexibility. So for me, I'm a runner. So running is very much a part of that balance for me. But there are days where it's like, oh, I don't really feel like running today. And being able to take that step back and be like, all right, I'm going to go for a walk. And yoga is a big part of it for me. And that can even be like a 5-minute practice before I go to sleep. And being able to kind of make those shifts and be like, you know what? Yoga doesn't have to be for an hour. Like, what's an hour? Do we just do an hour because that's what we've always seen? Because that's what, a lot of classes are. So being able to be flexible has really helped with the balance and also having those few moments in the morning, I find, of stillness when I'm able to be like, okay, today's gonna be a run day, or you know what, today is gonna be a melt with yoga day. Like I'm gonna do a little bit longer of a practice and maybe I'm not gonna go out for a run. And I find a lot of the balance comes from the flexibility in those activities and in those routines because routines are good, routines are grounding, but they don't have to be exactly the same. They just have to resonate. And I've found that that's been really helpful because I've had a lot of very specific routines that didn't quite work for me over time. And I think even with that, just taking into consideration, like seasonally we're different, day to day we're different, and our needs are going to be a little bit different. Like, my warm water is much warmer in the morning in the winter than it is in the summer.
Yeah.
Like I'll go for room temperature in the summer and that's okay. That's just a seasonal balance, just feeling it in instead of being like, it has to be this. And I've found that has been the most significant thing for me to, find that balance over time.
Yeah, you mentioned season to season, day to day. I mean, for me, it's like from morning to afternoon, like I'm different. You know what I mean? Like it shifts so drastically and so quickly. So, yeah, just having that little flexibility, giving yourself some grace, some freedom to just listen to your intuition and to what it's telling you, what you need in every moment, right? Not just having a regimented routine, because I can totally relate to having those perfectionist ways. And you said it too. If I think of something, I'm all in. That's me too. Um, so, yeah, I love the idea of being flexible with our time and our energy for sure. Well, how can people find out more about you and what you offer and what all do you offer online?
So I have a website. It is soulfulbeginnings.com, and I have all of my offerings on there. And I also have a freebie. It's the Restorative 5. So you can check that out if you'd like to get on my email list. And I do offerings in person and also online. So all of my classes are live streamed, both the melt and the yoga. And I also do some virtual work, like I'll do Ayurvedic coaching that's virtual, as well as I actually do reflexology for couples that want to learn just some simple techniques. I do that as well. And then I'll have some online course options coming up. I'm working on Reiki 1 as a hybrid, half online, half either in person or virtual. So I'm working on a few different things right now. So hopefully I'll have a few more online options coming soon in the future.
Very cool. Well, I'll be keeping you tagged in my bookmarks to stay on top of what's going on. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on. This was such a wonderful conversation. I really think that, like I said, you have a lot of yummy offerings. So there's a lot to choose from in working with you. So thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have so enjoyed this conversation and the fact that you have validated that yummy is a word that I could use for my offerings. I just love that so much. Thank you so,
Absolutely.
so much.
Such great takeaways from this conversation. I loved Elizabeth's mention of just being flexible with your time and your energy to find balance. I can certainly attest to this right now, having just made a cross country move. I'm actually recording this particular piece with you on my first day home alone in the new home office. And you guys, it's been a whirlwind. I have not made time for meditation or yoga or even just daily reading. But I think just being aware is enough, that I kind of need to get things in order around here before I can comfortably commit and enjoy my time doing those things. So I've prioritized what needs done so that I can integrate those things that I love back into my routine, in turn, finding my normal state of balance. Be sure to take a look at Elizabeth's website. That's soulfulbeginnings.com. Soul is spelled SOLE, as in the sole of your foot. Her Reiki certification course is now live. She was buttoning it up at the time of our recording, so I wanted to mention that it is now available if that particular part of the conversation spoke to you. The links are in the show notes, as is the link to Elizabeth on Instagram if you want to follow her there as well. Jade Scott Design is officially rooted in Austin, Texas. As I mentioned, I'm getting things in order around here, especially the online shop. Inventory is still boxed up, and my goal is to get it ready for shipping out on November 1st. There is a note at the top of my webpage that shop items are currently unavailable, but will be shipping very soon. Please make sure you're on our email list. I'll also be picking up momentum there now that I'm getting settled in. And lastly, please rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast. I'm going to be making some tweaks as I approach the end of the year. I cannot believe I've been podcasting almost a year at this point. I've learned so much in just a short year, and so I'm looking to changing things up and expanding the podcast and reaching new listeners. So you can certainly help me do that by writing a review or sharing any episode with others. And if there's any topics you are particularly interested in, let me know. You can always email me at jsd@jadescottdesign.com. Until next time, much love and gratitude.